Okay, so this next Q&A video is, what is a psychic vampire and how can I tell? I don't know what happened. My audio cut out and I've tried to make this video a couple of times now. I'm going to list some definitions in the description below, so you have like some verbatim answers of what a psychic vampire is by definition. But the boiled down quick definition is, this is a person that needs outside energy, that they do not either make, conserve, or are able to hold on to their own form of energy. This goes, i.e., if I sleep, it's not really restful. I can rest my mind, I can rest my body, but there's no rejuvenation. That sucks. So for me, how can I tell another psychic vampire that I'm energy sensitive? I can feel the difference. Sometimes I can even see the difference. People kind of walk around like batteries with legs. They all have an etheric body. They all have energy in their physical body. They all have an energy field. They all have an aura. All of these compile a person. And every person is different. So the difference for someone who's energy sensitive would be you'd be able to feel the difference. You'd be able to see the difference. An unconscious psychic vampire is going to be chaotic. They have no control. Zero. They cause problems in their lives. They cause problems for their friends and their family. They are highly destructive. They will blame all their problems on someone else. They are takers. I mean, the easiest way to define is a shit starter. These are drama mamas. The person that comes to you and calls you for a problem and stays on the phone with you for 4 hours, and you're trying to help this person. You're trying to give them every little thing you can give them to solve their problem or to help or console them. And they're just shooting you down and shooting you down. And it's not rude. It's just like, no, that won't work. And no, I've already tried that. And that doesn't work either. And oh no, what am I? Yak, 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 yak. You can give these people the best information, the best of advice, the safest of advice. And they will literally take it and be like, how can I turn this on its head? How can I do the opposite of what you said? And how can I blame you? I kid you not. These are people that you don't want in your life. They have no morals about their feeding habits. They're not even aware that they're doing it. It gives vampirism a bad name. And depending on how old these people are, when you recognize that this is what they are, how old that person is determines on, do they have hope for awakening? Sometimes the answer is no. Especially, if they're, I would say, if it's bad, if their chaos has spread outside them and has ruined several relationships, and this is something that they've been doing for years, it's become an addictive thing and a chronic problem. And I'd say by 23, if you're still doing that, and it's still ruining in your life, and you have no intention of stopping, there is no hope for you. I know that sounds terrible to say, but there's an addictive factor that keeps these people from doing the right thing. And they're addicted to the energy that they receive. They are not aware, nor do they care, that they could be doing this ethically, positively, and be getting so much more out of it. That the negativity and that the energy that they're getting is minuscule to the amount that they could be getting doing it positively and doing it the right way. So looking at a psychic vampire that is awakened means you may never know that they're there, because they're going to blend into a crowd. They're going to, I mean, if I don't want to be noticed, I don't have to be noticed. There are times I have shielded so tightly. I've asked a question in a group setting and nobody even heard me. I have been sat on before as if people didn't even know I was there. There have been times in like auditoriums, theaters, where I've been sitting in a row all my own and had 4 people approach me and have me get up because I'm in the aisle seat and move so they can sit in my row because my row is the only one left. And they've gone, we'll be back. And I'm like, there's nowhere else to sit. I'm like, do I smell? I mean, like, I realize I look kind of creepy sometimes, but this sort of like oil and water not mixing kind of a thing happens a lot for me. I remember one time I was, I had like some stir-fried rice, and I was sitting at a table at a Wajimaya where they have tables of, narrow tables, 2 seats on either side, and there's like 5 to 6 tables that are just stacked together, and I'm sitting in the middle of 3, so 6 seats. I'm in the middle seat on one side, and these people come by and they're clearly looking for a place to sit, and they just walk on by like they can't even see me, as if the seats are full. And my mother has to sit down next to me in order for other people to want to sit down around me. It's like, what is this? This has happened in theaters where there's been like 7 people in an entire theater and everyone else sits on the other side of the theater from you. It's not that people hate me, guys. They don't even know me. It's a simple, there's something, a polarity that happens, I guess, where you end up being the odd man out. Somehow, even a mundane person can recognize that there's a difference. An unawakened will feed off of you, and you'll be like, oh, it's so nice to see you again, have a good day. And you're like, oh my God, that person was so exhausting. For a mundane person, that might be all that you notice. For an awakened vampire dealing with an awakened, you may not notice anything except for the absence of natural energy, because we're shielding, because we know better. We want to have distance between you and us, because without it, there's danger to you and danger to us, because a lot of us are highly empathic. We don't want to feed on you. We don't want to auto feed. And we don't want you accidentally sharing too much information with us, because our senses are highly sensitive, and I've done a video on that. So there's always going to be sort of like this space. And sometimes younger psychic vampires that have learned to shield, they have these huge shields. I mean, we're talking like Hulk-size shields. Or, it'll be something. Usually they're just very big and elaborate. You'll see somebody who looks like, I've got a good cloaking shield that makes me look like the ghost of Christmas future. It looks like a veiled cloak. I look like a freaking Dementor. Except for, I don't look all that bony. It's just a swathed cloak. And I tried to give it sort of a mirrored effect. So the images of what's around me kind of like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak. It's not that I'm not there. It's sort of mirrored to the point where you can't see me. And that's to give other people privacy. It's to give me privacy. And so this beautiful gentleman that I refer to, that I went to school with, was very much the same way. I never approached this person and said, I know who you are. but it was just sort of like a silent fact that I could recognize this person. And they never came up to me and said the same thing. There was sort of like this quiet understanding that we would not approach each other. Even to confirm this a little bit, I remember being in a class and stretching out my shields and sort of like laying roots on everyone. It looked like these red roots. They're just sort of like attaching things to everything in the room. Sort of like, is it War of the Worlds or the Day the Earth Stood Still? I can't remember which one. It's got Tom Cruise in it. You know, where the guy's like, not my blood! And he's like, we've got to kill this one. He's going to get us killed. And the alien spaceships are like barfing this red stuff everywhere. And then it's like growing roots. Kind of look like that, if you've seen that movie. And I decided to put a whole lot on top of this one young man. And I was just like, I'm going to hold you down with this stuff. And it got intense enough that he walked away, which was awesome. And I'm just like, yeah. I was like, you run, you fail. I mean, he probably just went to the bathroom, but he stayed there for like the entire class. And when he came back, he stayed in the hallway. Coincidence? I don't know. But my point is that, you know, I can recognize another psychic vampire. I can recognize another vampire. Anyone who's energy sensitive, I can recognize. You know, throwing a beacon out there and letting it bounce back against somebody is very easy. But to a mundane person, you're probably only going to recognize the vacuum effect. And someone actually came up to me and they said, you know, everybody's a vampire. There's always an energy exchange between people. And I said, too right. Too right. Except for the fact that a psychic vampire can drop you like a friggin' rock. This isn't like, you know, oh, hi, how are you? You know, oh, it's nice to meet you. How do you do? It's not this kind of you know, polite conversation transferring. That's not what this is about. I had a friend once, we were at a concert. I'm not sure if I've explained this story or not, but she caused a fight between this small gaggle of Filipino young ladies. And she was absolutely fuming. And I was like, you are going to cause a fight. You are going to take a swing at somebody and you're going to get us kicked out. And I'm like, I don't need to be in trouble. I don't need yo ass to be in trouble. And I'm like, I'm warning you. Don't do it. Please be mature. And these girls were just trying to get a rise out of her, desperate for a rise. And I mean, first there were only 2 or 3, and then they came back with more. And I was like, oh, yay, you know, fabulous. And I said, please just go back inside. And she was like, well, why are you out here? And I'm like, I'm trying to get some air. And they're not coming inside. So why don't you go inside? Maybe they were underage. I have no idea. You know, maybe they had somebody inside that was, you know, allowed inside and they weren't, or maybe they just didn't feel comfortable going inside. I have no idea. Maybe the music wasn't to their liking. But they were, I mean, also, if they had done this inside, they would have gotten kicked out. So the fact that they were doing it outside this small concert, you know, they were heckling, they were just desperately trying to get a rise out of her, and it was working. And I said, you know, I don't want you doing this. And I'll take the fight right out of you. And she looked at me, this friend of mine was Wiccan, and I was like, don't do it. Don't do it. I was like, just step back, just walk away. It's okay. It's okay. Just take a breath and walk away. And they said something, because I wasn't paying attention to what they were saying, but she was. She wasn't paying attention to a thing I was saying. And she took a step forward, I grabbed her on the back of the neck, and I sucked for all it was worth, and she was down on her knees before the end of it. I mean, it took like, what, 5 seconds? And immediately, you know, her friend came over and looked at me, and I was like, how do you feel like fighting now? And she was like, not really. And I was like, you still angry? And she said, no. And I was like, guess who's angry now? And she was like, oh no. You know, I've made my Kel angry. Never a good thing. And So I said, Jess, take your friend inside. And at that point, I mean, like even my ears had blown. Like I was like, couldn't barely hear anything. I was like foggy in my ears. It really raised my blood pressure. And I was trying to change it into an energy that I could use. So I started talking to one person, and I started talking to another until I had a small gaggle of my own friends around me. And then these women came back up to me and we're still trying to get a rise. And I was like, no, I'm not letting this happen. And I said, what's with these fried chickens over here? And everybody looked at them, looked at me and laughed. And some people knew what was going on, so they knew to laugh. And everybody just kind of followed. And one girl said, who are you calling fried chickens? And one of the girls came up out of this crowd and was like, don't bother her. She's cool. Don't bother her. You don't need to bother her. And they walked away. And I was like, oh, thank you. Somebody loves me up there, because I thought this woman at that point, if this girl that said that I was okay and chill hadn't opened her mouth, I knew that I probably would have had a fist in my face. And that wouldn't have been good. So these Filipino women that were just chirping to me. To me, it sounded like a hen house. And at that point, I was angry and ravenous. They dispersed. My group of friends went inside, and my friend, who was also a psychic vampire, sat down beside me, and he's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "Not good, not good." And he said, "Well, I'm gonna go inside, and I'll be back later to check on you." And I was sitting on the corner, and I had called my mother because I wasn't driving at this point. I was that young. And I said, I'd like for you to come pick me up. I don't want to be here anymore. And she was like, oh, I thought you'd be there for at least another 4 hours, 5 hours. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I can start walking if you want. And she said, no, I'll be there. It's not that far. And this poor kid came up to me and said, do you have a light for a cigarette? And I looked at him, and it must have been a terrible look, because he said, please don't hurt me. Her anger was so strong, it translated over to me instantly. Is that, you feed on people who are under the influence, you become under the influence. At least to some extent. So I hope that kind of tells you a little bit about what a psychic vampire is. Is that even though we can all be psychic vampires, that there is a need, and it is a strong need. And without feeding, I mean, we've all tested it. All of us that are awakened, we have tested not feeding, and we get sick, we get bedridden. I mean, there are people that, like, we don't even know how they're alive. I know people who have leukemia, and I'm like, how are you not in a hospital bed? And they're like, because I have a donor. And I'm like, wow, that's it. And they're just like, oh, and I have an excellent vitamin regimen. I'm like, wow, that's even more amazing. I mean, and the fact that they're, nearly in their 50s and that they're still alive is amazing. Is that it is a physical need. I've had, before I was the age of 21, 17, I had shingles 3 times in my life. If I do not feed, I get very, very sick. And that's the difference, is that human beings can be isolated for years and still survive. There are communities, remote communities, that do just fine with each other. It's not the exchange that a mundane and a mundane will have. I feel that it's a lot bigger of an exchange and more frequent. Lono, I don't want to butcher your name, Lono Vespitelio had the theory of the leaky bucket. Is that no matter how much water you put in, there's a hole at the bottom, and the water goes right out. It can be a small hole, it can be several small holes, but eventually the bucket gets empty because it doesn't hold things as well as it should. And I think that's what everything I can tell you about what is a psychic vampire and how to recognize one, is that if you're looking for awakened psychic vampires, you may never find them because they don't want to be found. And we will strategize so we keep our privacy. Someone will actively have to tell you unless you can figure it out by feeling it out. And as for having psychic abilities, everybody can have them. It's something that it can be born in the on position, but it's also something you can learn yourself. It's like a muscle, you can grow it, you can strengthen it. Everybody has the potential. And that's why I really don't like using the term mundane, but on a pH scale from vampire, energy sensitive, mundane, that's kind of how it goes. Is that, you have people, like my father, who are in between energy sensitive and mundane, but are vampires. My father is an unawakened and is 74 years old and never will awaken. It's too late. Is that at a certain point of negatively feeding on people when you are unawakened, you will not awaken, because you feel somewhere in your mind, it's better that I do things this way instead of taking responsibility because I've been doing it for so long and I'm addicted. It's easier to spot the unawakened. Everybody probably has one in their life. You probably have one in your family. I have one in my family. So I think this concludes the end of this video, and hopefully nothing went wrong with it. Let's see in the editing process how bad this went. Anyway, have a good night.